You're the man everybody calls when something falls apart. You fix it, you handle it, and you ask for nothing back. If you're a black man in your 50s, people lean on you constantly, and almost none of them ever stop to ask who you lean on. Psychology says the strongest man in the room is often the most alone. This video is about why that strength got built and what it quietly costs. Let's start with the man you are now, not the boy you were. You're the one holding the whole family together from the quiet center. You're the coworker who never melts down and never calls in soft. You're the friend other men come to, the one who seems unshakable. From the outside, you look like a man who has it all handled. And in 100 real ways, you absolutely do have it handled. But somewhere in your 50s, a quieter feeling starts showing up. You realize you can carry everyone and still feel strangely unseen. You have plenty of people who need you, but few who truly know you. This isn't some small private failing, and the numbers back that up. Researchers now describe a real friendship recession among American men. The share of men with 6 close friends has fallen by half since 1990. Today, roughly 1 in 7 men report having no close friends at all. For the dependable man, that one statistic hits a very specific nerve. Because being needed and being known are not the same thing. So why does this land on black Gen X men in such a particular way? Part of the answer is a script you were handed about strength itself. The culture told every man to stay tough and look unbothered. For black men, that message often arrived earlier and hit twice as hard. Be strong, provide, protect, and never let anybody see you struggle. You learn to wear that strength like a second skin. But strength worn that tightly starts to seal other things out. To see how, you have to look at where the armor was forged. And that means looking honestly at the world that shaped you. Picture the decade when you were coming up, somewhere in the 1980s. A war on drugs was declared, and it landed hard on black blocs. The prison population exploded from about 300,000 in 1980 to over 2 million. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 created brutally long mandatory sentences. 5 grams of one drug carried the prison time of 500 of another. Those laws were not fair, and they were not applied evenly. They pulled fathers, uncles, and brothers out of black homes at staggering rates. So a lot of boys grew up with an empty seat at the table. But here's the part almost nobody bothered to say out loud. That absence was never proof that black men don't care about family. When black fathers are present, the data shows they show up more, not less. A federal health report found they led in the daily, hands-on parenting. They led in feeding, bathing, reading to, and showing up for their kids. So that empty chair was the result of a system, not a character flaw. Now add what the world outside the home decided about you. Researchers call it adultification, and it follows black boys nearly everywhere. Studies find black children are seen as less innocent and more grown up. A 10-year-old gets read as a young man who needs no protecting. So you received less of the very thing every child needs most. You got less protection, and you got a lot more expectation. And here's where it gets interesting, in a way few people warn you about. Somebody you loved probably told you to be the man of the house. You were still a kid, but you took that job dead seriously. You stopped crying, because crying never seemed to help anyone around you. You learned to read the room and stay a step ahead of trouble. You handled the hard things, and you kept the handling to yourself. There's decades of research on how boys get taught to manage feelings. Traditional masculinity tells a boy to bury it and look unbothered. So those feelings never vanished, they just went underground for years. But here's the thing about burying your feelings for that long. You don't only get good at hiding them from other people, you slowly lose the ability to find them inside yourself. Psychologist Janice Webb gave this pattern a name: childhood emotional neglect. It isn't about something cruel that was actively done to you. It's about a question that was rarely asked in the first place. Nobody asked how your day really went, so eventually you stopped checking. By the time you were grown, the armor was already complete. You could carry almost anything. So that is exactly what you did. You became the man everyone leaned on and absolutely nobody worried about. But that kind of strength always comes with a hidden price tag. Back in the 1980s, an epidemiologist named Sherman spotted a pattern. He studied black men who pushed through every obstacle on pure willpower. He called that relentless, high-effort coping style Henryism. John Henry was the folk hero who outworked a steam-powered machine. He beat the machine, and then his own heart gave out. The researchers weren't expecting what those determined men's bodies were showing. The men who coped the hardest also carried the highest blood pressure, especially the ones fighting uphill the longest, with the fewest resources. Their determination was completely real, and it was quietly costing them their health. The body keeps a running tab, the proud mind refuses to read. So the strength was never fake, and it was never free. Now connect all of that back to the man we started with. The part nobody talks about is what it did to his friendships. The same wall that kept the old pain out also kept people out. If depending on people once got you let down, you simply stopped depending. That strategy works fine at 12, but it gets lonely at 55. So the isolation you feel now isn't a sign that you failed. It's the long echo of a wall you built to survive. And loneliness, it turns out, is far more than an uncomfortable feeling. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General called it a genuine health emergency. Isolation raises the real risk of heart disease, stroke, and dementia. They compared its toll on the body to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So the same armor shows up twice in one man's life. Once it saved the boy from a world that offered no protection. Now it quietly taxes the man who never learned to set it down. Same wall, two completely different jobs, decades apart, and almost no one ever told you the wall could come down. That isn't because you're slow or stubborn or somehow broken. It's because the wall worked so well you forgot it was even there. Which brings us to the part that actually changes things. Here is the reframe that quietly rewrites the whole story. That wall was never proof that something is wrong with you. It was the smartest thing an unprotected boy could possibly build. Self-reliance was never a flaw you need to apologize for. It was a survival skill you earned in a world that demanded it. You weren't cold all those years, and you weren't avoiding people. You were carefully protecting a kid who learned early that people leave. What that armor actually means is that you survived something hard. A boy looked at an impossible situation and quietly adapted to it. He didn't break, he built, and the building kept him standing. The thing about Gen X is that nobody was coming to save us. We were handed a key, a list of chores, and good luck. But your story carried a weight most people never even saw. You held the empty chair and the heavy decade at the very same time. And you still grew into a man who reliably shows up. Sit for a second with what that actually took out of you. You parented yourself with no manual, no map, and no backup. You turned absence into discipline and silence into a kind of strength. Those are not the traits of a broken or damaged man. Those are the traits of a man who flatly refused to go under. The strength in you was always real, and it was always yours. The only real lie was that you had to carry it completely alone. The wall had an important job once, and that job is mostly done now. The danger that built it isn't standing over your shoulder anymore. You're allowed to notice that this particular war is finally over. You don't have to tear the whole wall down all at once. You just get to know there's a door somewhere in it. One trusted person, one honest sentence, one thing you don't carry alone. That isn't weakness arriving embarrassingly late in your life. That's a man finally claiming something he was owed long ago. So if you're that man, sitting there right now, hear this part clearly. You were never unloved. You were underprotected by forces far bigger than your home. The strong, dependable man you became did his job, and did it well. He kept everyone around him safe, including the boy he used to be. You did the very best you could with what you were handed, and what you were handed was an enormous amount to hold. You're not broken, and you are nowhere near too far gone. You're a man who raised himself, and you are still standing here. That deserves real respect, not a quiet diagnosis. The distance that always looked like coldness was actually a kind of devotion. Devotion to a kid who needed somebody badly, so he became that somebody. You were never hiding from connection. You were guarding a wound. And a wound that's been guarded long enough is finally allowed to heal. The strength that carried everyone can finally set part of the load down. You earned a rest you have never once let yourself actually take. The man who learned to need no one is allowed to choose differently now. Not because the old way was wrong, but because you are finally safe. You can still be the strong one and also let someone in. Those two things were never actually in conflict. You raised that boy well, and it turns out that boy grew up to be you.